Hey everybody, Ethan here from WordTech, back with another video, and today I'm going to be doing a fairly in-depth tutorial on how to back up TrueNAS to Backblaze B2 in specific. Now, this is going to be using TrueNAS Scale. The same thing for the most part applies to TrueNAS Core if you're still running that, although I think at this point most people have moved over to Scale, the Linux-based variant. But I wanted to make a video to go over this. This will apply to other storage, like S3 storage providers and stuff like that. It's pretty similar, but I'm choosing Backblaze in specific because that's my preferred backup provider, and I figured I'd start just by kind of explaining why they're my preferred backup provider. And it comes down to a few things. So I've tried a lot of them. Like, obviously you can go straight to S3. You can obviously the other big cloud providers, GCP, Azure, whatever you want. There's also some other options that sometimes seem a little bit better priced, like Wasabi's pricing I think is still $5 a month per terabyte. But there's a few key things about Backblaze that makes me want to use them. First off, I just like using them. You'll see in their UI, it's very easy to use. They have lots of really good instructions everywhere. They have good documentation and stuff like that, and their support team is also pretty great. So those are a few reasons, but the big reasons really come down to a couple of things here. So the pay-as-you-go is really straightforward. This is one of the reasons I like Backblaze, is they are not trying to do what they can to get more money out of you, and there's not hidden fees and stuff. So before I even go into in-depth of what I mean by that, because this sounds simple and how could you exaggerate it, but there's actually a key point there in comparison to some other providers. But the other one here that I'll cover first actually is the free egress up to 3 times your storage. So they take the average of your monthly storage and apply that to your account as free egress. And what that means is you can use Backblaze B2 specifically as your backup provider. And if you want to restore, you don't have to pay any money to restore your data, which is a big deal. Whereas a lot of other providers, you're going to pay for that data egress out of the cloud provider. That's, it's going to vary by provider, but it can be expensive to do restores, especially obviously way cheaper per size, but per gigabyte. But if you're using S3 Glacier Deep Archive, you're going to be spending a lot of money to restore that if you ever need to restore, which is an important thing to keep in mind. Now, the other thing is that they do this properly, where there are actually no minimums in terms of how long you have to keep the data around. And that's down here in the FAQ section. So it's the way that the payment works is it's services billed monthly based on the amount of data stored per byte hour over the last month at a rate of $6 per terabyte per 30 days. And why that's a big deal is that means you can put something up there for a couple of days and remove it. And if you do that, you are not paying for the entire month or many months of keeping that data in there. There are other providers that require that anything that gets uploaded, you have to pay for it for a certain amount of months. You don't have to do that with B2. And that's a big deal, especially because if you're just a hobbyist or a home labber and you make a big mistake and accidentally back up a directory you didn't want to back up that had 20 terabytes in it, well, you're not going to have to pay for that for 6 months like some other providers would require. You do that, you catch it, you delete it, you pay for it per byte hour. So based on the amount of time that data was in there. So you can save a lot of money, and it helps cover your mistakes, which is a really big deal. And so this is kind of what I mean about no hidden fees or anything like that. They do a really good job of outlining this. You're not getting screwed. If you use I can't remember if it's actually still this way because I haven't used them in a while, but back when I used Wasabi for backup, they have minimum requirements. I think it's only a month for them, but still that's a problem and is annoying because it's you upload something and then you have to pay for it for a month even if you delete it. That's really frustrating. Now also Backblaze doesn't have tiering, not really. If you go up to the B2 page, they have B2 Overdrive, but not going to use that. And that's just what it sounds like. It's much faster and is going to be used for, machine learning workloads and other stuff like that. But for backup and archiving, you've got really simple pricing. There's not a bunch of tiers to manage. You're not moving data between tiers. So these are the reasons that I like to go with Backblaze. And then I also like their admin panel. So we'll jump over to the admin panel over here, and I'll kind of show you what it would be like to create a bucket. Now, some of the stuff's going to be blurred out here because I'm actually showing you this with a production account. But we'll create a new bucket, configure the settings on the bucket, and then we're going to go over and actually upload some data to that bucket from my NAS that I have here so you can see what that looks like. So once you create your account on Backblaze and everything, you just can go to the bucket section of the B2 Cloud Storage. You do create a bucket. You can name the bucket here. I'll just call this WordTech Reviews Sample, and You can have it be private or public. It's private by default. Leave it private. Obviously, public does mean that it's publicly accessible because you can use buckets for all kinds of stuff since this is similar to S3. Now, I always turn on the default encryption, but we will actually cover client-side encryption as well in this video over on the TrueNAS side, which you've got to remember that if you're not managing the keys, you can't trust that it's actually for sure private. Now, might as well do this because there's no like penalty to this, except that you can't as easily, like you can't download files from the UI. You have to use API calls and stuff to do that. But if you're going to restore, you're probably going to restore from your NAS anyway. And there are other ways to do that through like CLI and stuff like that. So I always recommend just turn that on. Object lock can be disabled. We don't need that for the purposes here. You can dig into that if you want to understand a little bit more about it. So we create the bucket. It'll take a second to create the bucket. And now we're here with the bucket available. And the other thing I like to do is go into my lifecycle settings. The default is that it will keep all versions of files. So what this means is if you delete a file, and that also means if your NAS marks a file as deleted, it'll be hidden instead of actually deleted. And so it's still taking up space. Now, I actually like that the default is keep forever because that's the easiest way to prevent people from making bad mistakes and then realizing that they deleted stuff they didn't mean to. But what I like to do is keep prior versions, and I like to do 30 days. Now, you can do this to whatever you want, but basically, that's going to make it so that for 30 days, if something is deleted, it doesn't actually get deleted out of the bucket until that 30-day period expired. Now, you don't have to do anything special around that. You delete it on your NAS syncs over and marks that delete, the file becomes hidden, and then 30 days later, the file disappears. So it's a really great way to manage this. You don't have to think about it, but it gives you that 30-day grace period. Maybe don't enable that if you're new to this and you're just testing it or something like that. But if you are experienced, like, and everything, then go ahead and do that and add that 30-day lifecycle option to the bucket you're going to use for your actual proper backups. That's my opinion. Now, of course, you can go longer as well. And if it's not a lot of data, maybe just leave it as the default of just keep everything forever. Okay, so now we're over here on my NAS, and I'm going to show you where you're going to go to add the credential that you would need in order to actually integrate with Backblaze, because it's not as simple as just like logging in. You do have to create an API key to use. So that is going to be over on the credentials section, and then you will have backup credentials. And I'll have some of these blurred out. Again, this is a production system, but you'll do a new cloud credential, and this is where you're going to add it, and you can select Backblaze B2 from the dropdown over here. And then you can name it whatever you want. So I'll call this word text sample. And then your key ID and application key are actually going to come from the Backblaze admin panel here. So you'll go back over to the admin panel, and then you'll go to application keys on the left-hand side. And you will not generate a new master application key. Do not do that. You really don't want to give full access to the entire thing. You should do it on a per bucket basis in case you want to do other stuff here. So you don't want to generate a new master key, and you don't want to use the master key on TrueNAS. You want to use per bucket keys. So you go down here, you do add new application key. I'm also going to call this word text sample, and you tell it you only want to give it access to the specific bucket that you're trying to do. Now you want to do read and write so that you're able to delete from this and then restore from this as well. So write, delete, restore, all of that. And you can add other stuff like, again, the file name prefixes and stuff if you want to, but you don't have to do that. So you create the new key, and it will give you this key. This is a one-time key, so make sure that you either save this in a password manager or you save it into your NAS before you time out or anything, right? But of course, you can always come create a new key if you need a new key later, and if you're trying to restore on a different system and it didn't work or something, then you can just create a new key that has access to that bucket and then update the credential that you're using. Now, I like to verify the credential because it's going to check to make sure that that is indeed a successful credential that it's able to use. And then we save that. And then now that we've done that, we can go over to the data protection section, and you're going to be doing the cloud sync tasks here. So it's not true cloud backup or any of this other stuff. And again, I'm sorry, some stuff will be blurred out because this is production, but cloud sync tasks. And I always like to open up the full page rather than using the little mini one. In fact, I prefer this layout and kind of wish they'd change the UI a bit. So once you're here, you'll go ahead and do an add operation. And what we're actually going to do is, instead of trying to use the wizard, the simple wizard, we're going to click advanced. So we're going to go over to advanced. That will clear whatever you've entered into the wizard. So keep that in mind. Don't enter anything. Just go straight to advanced. And I'll show you why we're doing that for a few reasons. So you can name it whatever you want here. So I'm going to call this word text sample as well. You tell it the credential that you want to use, which in this case is the word text sample credential that I created. So I select that. The direction should be push. You do not want pull because we're uploading to the bucket. So you're pushing that data out. And then the bucket over here, you should only have the bucket that credential has access to visible. So you select your bucket. You want to do sync for the transfer mode. Sync is going to make it so that if you delete something on your NAS, it goes out and deletes it on the backup provider as well. This is my preferred method of doing it. You can do it other ways with a copy instead, but I definitely prefer sync because then when I mark something deleted, it gets marked deleted on the other end. So that's important there, and that's also why I set those lifecycle rules in places so that if I delete something by mistake on the NAS, I still have time to recover it for that 30-day period. So now you're going to select the folder that you want to upload to, which is just going to be the root directory of that bucket, unless you decided to create folders within that bucket. I don't know why you would do that. Really, I think one bucket per backup sync task is the way to go. That's my opinion to keep it organized. Then you're going to select the directory that you actually want to upload. And in this case, I don't want to upload my entire directory. I want to upload my Backblaze directory. Down here is the directory that I want to upload. So I created this as a sample directory for us, and it just has a couple of BRAW files in it. Then down here, you've got the controls for doing the schedule. You have some presets that you can select from down here if you want to just use a preset one. If you have a lot of these, I suggest not running them all at the same time. I suggest doing something a little bit different, like 15-minute increments, or it depends on your upload speeds, of course. So you can do also a custom schedule. And the nice thing is the custom schedule lets you select a template first. So you can be like, I want to back this up daily, but instead of daily at midnight, I want to do it daily at 2 a.m. So you put 2 for the hours, and then it gives you a sample over here of how often this one's going to run. Now, I'm not going to put in a schedule. I'm going to disable that because I'm only going to be using this one time. Advanced options over here, and this is one of the reasons that we decided to not use the wizard. You need to make sure use snapshot is on. Don't ever not have that checked. This prevents any kind of file locking or anything like that going on. So basically, the NAS will take a snapshot and then it backs up that snapshot. So you don't have to worry about changes that are happening to the directory, which can be really important for a very busy directory. Now you can create empty source directories on the destination if you want to as well. I don't do that because I don't have any empty directories, but maybe you want to do that for some reason. You have pre and post script that you can add in here. I never use that personally, but there's plenty of reasons why you might want to use those. You can also exclude certain types of files in here if you want to do that. My philosophy is just back up the whole thing. Don't make it too complicated, but there may be reasons that you want to do that. And then the upload chunk size here is the chunk size of the each like chunk that it uploads, so the chunk size. And the chunk size here, like I said, the single largest file being transferred must fit into no more than 10,000 chunks. The default is 96. Sometimes I will bump this up. You don't always need to, and I'm not going to in this video, but you can go ahead and do like a larger chunk size. If you have a lot of data or a lot of very large files, you may want to upload that chunk size because it can create a limit issue, and then you run into a problem where you can't do your backup. I believe you can change this after the fact, so it's not the end of the world if you run into a problem and need to up it later, but just something to be aware of if you're uploading a lot of data. And then you have the use fast link or fast list. Always check that. It just makes it so that it doesn't do as many API calls. I can't remember with Backblaze if this actually results in any kind of fees at all by not using that. I don't think so, not in most cases, but I always check that because it doesn't hurt anything. And then remote encryption is one of the ones that I wanted to cover here. So this is the client-side encryption that you can do so that you're not just relying on Backblaze, who's managing your keys, in order to do a good job of keeping everything secure. So I like to do the remote encryption, the client-side encryption, before uploading any data. That's my preference, and I think most people should go for that. It's not very hard. The big thing is that you have to know that you are encrypting this client-side, and if you do not back up the password and the salt that you're using for that encryption, then you will not be able to get your data back. It is not possible. So that's the important factor here to keep in mind. But if you have a password manager or something like that, which is what I use, then you can just put an encryption password and encryption salt in here, and then save it in your password manager and make sure you name it well, and then you don't have to worry about in the future if you need to restore on a new NAS, right? If it's the same NAS, you can do a restore operation on the NAS itself. But if it's a new NAS, then you're going to have to re-enter these credentials. So I just entered a random encryption password and encryption salt. And then you can select the bandwidth that you want to use, which is the number of transfers. You can also do a custom transfer amount. So these equate to how many like simultaneous chunks that it's uploading at the same time. I have really high bandwidth here, so I always go high bandwidth. You can also, though, again, enter custom and go even higher than this. And then you can enter a hard bandwidth limit, which is kind of nice. So if you want this to only be able to use 5 megabits a second or something like that, then you can enter it there. So after all is done, you just click save at the bottom. This saves that Cloud Sync task. And then you can, if you want, to do a dry run. I know this is configured right, so I'm not going to do a dry run, but you can do a dry run, which just validates that everything's working and basically makes sure it actually has access to that bucket and everything. But what I'm going to do instead is just do run now, continue, and what it's going to do is it's going to take a snapshot, and I don't think the log here shows the snapshot, and then it will start uploading it. You can see it's 1.8 gigabytes, so shouldn't take super long here. And it'll take it a second to like list the directory and everything like that, so don't be surprised for it to sit there for a minute before it actually starts moving any data. And then you can see here, this is going to be done in just a few seconds here. So, and you can abort it if you need to for whatever reason, if something seems wrong, but be patient with it, like listing your directory and stuff. And then it'll say success. So this backup is now finished. I can go back over to Backblaze, go back to my buckets. And if I go down here, I can go to the upload download. And what you'll see is we've got my file in here, which was a BRAW file that I had in place. That was exactly what it was. And it's encrypted, and it's encrypted by TrueNAS as well. So that's you've got kind of double encryption here, and then the lock means that it's encrypted, which means that you cannot download the file from any of the URLs that you have available here, but that's okay. You also cannot download it by like check marking it and doing a download, because it's going to say that encrypted files are not downloadable via the web user interface. So just something to be aware. But yeah, these you won't be able to use because these are going to require that it has public access. So that'd be like a public bucket instead of a private bucket. Now I'll go ahead and do a restore here as well, just so you can see what the restore operation looks like. So you just click restore on the one that you're doing. And I'm just going to call this test restore. You leave it on the copy mode is generally what you're going to want to use for a restore. So one-time copy operation. And then I've got my directory under the Backblaze directory restore. So you can browse the full directory. Like this is just a folder. This isn't a specific data set or anything like that. And then click restore. And I think I have to actually click run now on it. Yep. Run now, continue, running. And there we go. Restore is done. And I'm going to go check my directory, which I don't have on recording here, but in my directory, I have the BRAW file that I uploaded, and I have it unencrypted, because that is the nice thing about I'm using the actual Cloud Sync task here to initiate the restore. So it has all the encryption parameters. So it just decrypts it when it downloads it. So then you just get the file back in the directory of wherever you want to restore it to. And the nice thing about the way the restore UI works is you can restore to another directory. So you could back up a giant thing like, you know, I don't know, data or whatever. And then you could have like data-restore as a directory and restore everything to that. So you're not messing with the original in case you like, you know, you have some stuff you need to restore, but you don't want to touch the original at all. Like maybe you still have both. It wasn't a catastrophic event, but you need to get something back. So that's a nice feature that you can use as well. And then of course there are ways through the CLI and stuff that I will not cover in this video to restore a specific file. Now, if you don't use encryption, you can restore it. Like you don't use encryption at all, you can restore it from the Backblaze UI by just browsing the folders and clicking that you want to download it. But generally speaking, you're going to be encrypting your data. So you'd have to go through the CLI. You can use API calls and other stuff like that. But that's beyond the scope of this video. So thank you everybody for watching. I figured I'd show how to do this because I feel like there's not as many tutorials as there maybe should be on this, at least not up-to-date ones. And I think Backblaze is the best backup provider pretty much period for most use cases. There are some rarities where other ones make more sense, but their pricing and everything is just so much more streamlined that you don't end up paying stuff that you don't realize you're going to pay. So appreciate that. Not a sponsor or anything. I've just been using them a long time, and they've been frankly, the least amount of BS out of pretty much all of the other providers for stuff. So I continue to enjoy using them. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching. This was a fun one to put together, and let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about it or anything like that.